welcome to Follow the White Rabbit, where we go down the rabbit hole to explore the intersection of privacy, human rights, technology, and democracy. I'm your host, Alex Kahaya, and today we are speaking with David Chaum, who is the forefather of the crypto movement and proposed the first digital currency in his 1981 paper, Untraceable Electronic Mail, Return Addresses, and Digital Pseudonyms. He laid the groundwork for the field of anonymous communications research. His 1982 dissertation, Computer Systems Established, Maintained, and Trusted by Mutually Suspicious Groups, is the first known proposal of a blockchain protocol. Complete with the code to implement the protocol, Chaum's dissertation proposed all but one of the elements of the blockchain later detailed in the Bitcoin white paper. Along with his contributions to and innovations in cryptography and privacy technologies, he's also known for his work in secure election systems. David is currently CEO of XX Network, where they are building an easy-to-use, scalable, and private digital cash. Thanks for being on the show.
Hey, Alex, it's a blast. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to speak with you today, and I want to start off just with learning more about XX Network and the different technologies that you're working on there, and the impact that you feel your team can have on that intersection of privacy, human rights, democracy, and technology. It seems super impressive from the research that I've done, so I'm just excited to hear from you what that's all about.
Okay, well, I wasn't expecting you to ask me about our, offerings and technology, but I'm happy to talk about it in a somewhat, maybe not too hard sell commercial way, but
yeah.
We are, let's say, essentially in beta. So we've published the white papers and the technical papers, show all the details. Some of them are appeared in peer-reviewed publications and so on. So we've run message. So basically, we have two technologies that fit together very well, and there is a voting component as well. So one of the technologies is electronic money, and it's the only quantum secure electronic cash, and it's based on a linearly scalable, even sublinearly scalable consensus algorithm, which no one else has, and it's quantum resistant on top of that. So it's mega secure, and that's, like I said, running in beta. And then there's the messaging system, which is a way, so we thousands of people have tried it in alpha through our smartphone clients, and you basically can send limited size text messages back and forth between people. But the thing is that this implements what, and you can use it for sending money as well. Our money is something I called metadata shredding. So, in fact, the metadata is shredded before it's even constituted. So what actually happens is, say there's like 1,000 nodes in the distributed network, then every second, like 8 of them are chosen at random in an unmanipulatable manner. They form a team, and every message that's going to be transmitted that second is assembled into a batch, goes through those 8, and each one of them commutes it independently, uniformly at random. And then those messages can be decrypted and delivered. So unless all those 8 nodes, which are randomly chosen, we've got nodes already in like 60 countries, right, all conspired, that you would not know which message nothing about which input message corresponds with which output message, because each node does a completely independent, uniform random shuffle. So it's like, it's like if you pass a deck of cards around the table and everyone shuffles it perfectly and privately, randomly, then even if everybody's trying to find out which card is where, except one guy, that one guy can keep everyone completely in the dark, right? Because no one knows how he shuffled it.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, so that's our metadata shredding messaging, and it's been live in alpha, and when our beta comes up, it'll be soon after that live again in beta, and we have, like I said, like more than 5,000 people have used it, and we have different apps for our collective and so on, and so it's was very successful. People loved it. It was on Android and iOS, and I think you could do it from
that's really interesting. So
computers as well, and desktops. It's so you could say that shreds the metadata of who communicates with whom and when before it's even constituted, because none of those 8 nodes knows the metadata. They only know a part of it, and those parts are useless unless they're all put together, but then they each shred their part. They destroy that information, so it's like, I don't know, preemptive metadata shredding or something.
Well, what I'd like to, can you do a little comparison for me with, something like WeChat or WhatsApp? These are the things that I use. What kind of metadata am I sharing with those platforms, and how does that?
Dealing with an unarmed man comes to mind. Yeah. So Zuckerberg said in extensive essays, well, don't worry, we're protecting your privacy. After a few years, when we get it all approved, we're going to have end-to-end encryption. That's what it actually says in the essay. Just because someone tells you they have end-to-end encryption, it's really hard to know if that's really how true that is, because there's a little nasty secret thing called the man-in-the-middle attack. Maybe some of your readers have heard, or watchers, viewers, listeners have heard of that. I've published an article. There's an article published about it of my work, and other people. It's a very nasty problem, because like a little girl can sit in the middle between 2 chess grandmasters and convince each of them that she's beating both of them, right? Beating them because she just takes the moves from one and uses it against the other. So if you're the provider of a network, the setup of the keys to allow the end-to-end secure, strong end encryption based on standards promulgated by the U.S. government, which, I don't know why anyone would want to use those, because they don't use them themselves. It doesn't even make any sense. They've been caught red-handed. Did you read this thing? They were just recently caught. It's a huge scandal in Switzerland. They owned the 2 cryptography companies in Switzerland that were supplying gear to all the other countries around the world except the top few. I actually know those companies, and I broke their systems when I visited them years ago. That's a different story. But those were CIA proprietaries. Those were NSA front companies. So they intercept routers in the mail. They bribe people to break the standards. Remember that the cryptographic seed standard? They were caught paying $10 million to RSA to put a trapdoor encryption in that. So why would you use their standards? It's already revealed that they've rigged those standards. So, but anyway, so this notion called strong end-to-end encryption is like, that's like war is peace. That's doublethink, right? But even if there is no man in the middle, and even if that encryption really were, hard to break, then that still wouldn't be a very useful thing, because anyone in the intelligence business knows that the most interesting intercept is who talks to whom and when. You can listen into what people say, but they might be lying to you and misleading you, or they might speak in code. You just read, spy novels. I mean, you're wasting your time. But if you see who talks to who and when, then you know the command structure, the social structure, who the key people are. So, like, for example, I tell the story a bunch of times, and I don't want to bore you with it, but it's actually public record how the U.S. government took over Chile, the Allende Chile, and turned it over. So the way they did it is they tapped the phone central and found out who was talking to who. That's all. They didn't listen in, and they paid academics to analyze that data, figure out who to take out, and they just went in there with a surgical strike to go over the whole country, no sweat. So I mean, it's just known in the military intelligence. They call it traffic analysis. Now it's been rebranded by Obama as metadata. But metadata is a very, we used to say in computer science, overbound word, right? It has many different meanings to many. That diffuses the attention that it deserves, right? But it is, if you watch videos, and I've seen them live, presentations by Facebook executives. They used to always say, well, our biggest asset, our real asset is the social graph. We know the social graph. That's why our company's worth, X, zillion dollars. Because they realize it. Everyone in the business knows that it's the metadata, it's not the message content, and so it's it's a insulting misdirection to be told that somehow that the encryption is strong and that this is going to protect you, and that's the real issue. The real issue is the metadata, and so that's what our messaging system does. It shreds that metadata better than anything out there. I mean, what you want is large batch sizes, right? The size of the batch determines your anonymity set. Technically, you call it that, and then you could also add dummy traffic. Mm-hmm. So our phones send dummy traffic, and statistically, to look like real messages. So that basically, so with the combination of how good you are at the dummy traffic and how big the message batches are determines how good the metadata shredding is. And so what when we have high throughput, so we're getting we think we can do messaging in single batch per 2 seconds for 50 million users.
Wow.
That's what our current. I mean, that's an old estimate because that's not using the GPUs we're using now. So I mean, we could scale. That's why we're so interested in scaling. I mean, this is not like something for the people who are really interested in all this, right? We're making something that is strictly speaking targeted being and you appreciate this with your entrepreneurial and business background, what's technically referred to as a replacement product, right? We want to make it so that people can just say, oh, I was using these other messengers, but actually all I have to do is install this and I'm off to the races. I'm now using this better one that has the metadata shredding. But otherwise it's pretty much the same. And that's what we're going for.
That's great.
We want all now, this is a funny thing about people don't recognize this right away because it's not like this usually in business in technology, but the more traffic that goes over our network, the better for everyone because there's more anonymity.
Yeah, the batch size gets bigger and bigger the more people are using it.
More diverse. So we want other traffic to run over our network, and so we could do white label deals with any kind of messenger company and say, well, you keep your front end and all your business model and so on, but just let people have the option to send all the traffic over our network, and we're happy with that. So it's a it's not like we have to compete head on with WhatsApp or something like that. It's mm-hmm. like it's a replacement product that can also be white labeled, and so once the public, they're pretty pissed off about metadata already, right? Because of the Cambridge Analytica and all this other stuff. I think most people, actually, in my opinion, are in denial about it, in a certain kind of denial. They're like, oh, this metadata and privacy is so horrible. There's nothing I can do about it, so I guess I'll just ignore it and get on with my life because there's nothing they can do about it. So they just like, well, so you ask them, they're like, well, okay, no, I don't really worry about that too much. But actually, given a chance, they'd switch to something else in a heartbeat.
Yeah, we found that too. I think you touch on a really important aspect that's, I think, important for our whole space, which is education. I think a lot of consumers don't realize that there is a better option. I've talked to a lot of, I run business development for Orchid, so I've been on the street, at these conferences and stuff, and I meet people who are not from the space or even in the space that don't realize that there are other solutions out there. And when you tell them that is the case, that you can find a solution that, they kind of throw their hands up, like you said, hey, this is just the way it is. I just assume that I have to give up my data and privacy in order to use these tools. And it's not true anymore, especially with these, soon, as soon as, the sooner you get soon, it's coming fast that we'll have these other options. So metadata, what's in metadata?
It's a little late, but
yeah.
But I think now the world's ready for it. I don't think it's going to be that hard to educate people. I think they've already been educated and then gave up. And so once we have it, it's a replacement product. I think we're in. So I'm super excited about it. So that's the messaging technology that we have that's proven. It's published in refereed journals. It's thousands of people have used it. We've open sourced, revealed the source code on the part of the beta, and the rest will be like later this month, I believe. And so it's
cool.
It's all like really well, I hope, really well done and really solid code and really scalable. And I mean, I mentioned 50 million, but we could probably go to like quite a bit more than that. But then we have a way to scale it up linearly. So basically, the way we've designed the network, we can scale to whatever size is needed.
And do users, if I send a message to you, do I need a little bit of the XX coin in order to send that message, or how does that fit in?
Well, there's a phrase I remember from advertising. I hope I'm allowed to say. I guess you can say these trademark phrases or whatever. Remember that? I think that they always say "kids fly free" or something.
Yeah.
The whole point is that we want to, as a replacement product, we cannot charge users to send messages.
Yeah.
But if it turns out that in text messaging, companies pay a fair amount to send a lot of text messages to people. Now, I'm not a big fan of a lot of those messages you get, but if you're interacting with a healthcare provider or whatever, so our idea is that when companies want to send a lot of messages, they'll have to pay for it. But users, it's free, and we have a way to do that. It's all in the white paper, So basically, you get a certain allocation of messages, and those are free. And then if they're exceeded, then you have to pay for them, and that money goes like to the nodes.
Gotcha.
For the operating, so that the inflation can be lower.
And you mentioned metadata in the context of the Cambridge Analytica, fiasco, which I think everybody can relate to. What kind of things about me are in my metadata? Like, what can someone figure out?
No, what not? I'm the other question. Better way to answer it. I don't know what they couldn't figure out. I mean,
that's pretty frightening.
The problem is partly you don't know, and that so the privacy space for the last I've been involved in for many decades. Mm-hmm. Actually, the sort of the initial literature introduced this term chilling effect. So people that have been in this space always just refer to it as a chilling effect. It's a well-known thing, but the public's not that aware of it these days. But all the people that have been in this forever, take that as a starting point, right? If you think that you're being spied on, then that already impacts your behavior. I was in China, before you couldn't, travel that much easily, and recently, and people were, really reluctant to say things and do things. Whereas like a year or two ago, it wasn't so like that so much. They were commenting about, all these cameras and all this stuff, and we send messages over, and they get changed or whatever. Bad things happen to you. I mean, it's like
it's Orwellian. It's crazy.
Thing from the literature, the so-called panopticon, right, where the worst prison is where the guards are in the middle, they can see everyone all the time. So it's antithetical to the kind of participation that people need to have in order to have democracy. And if you lose democracy, you've lost the whole game. People are, democracy's on the decline now. This recent published study of 100 pages long that uses all public data that you can check, that shows per region confidence in democracy has been dropping. It differs per region, but now globally it's crossed below 50%, almost everywhere except Denmark, Finland, and Switzerland. So more than half of people don't believe that democracy can even work. They don't, so that's a very, very, it's one thing to believe you can't have metadata protection in your messaging if you can meet with people personally, right? But if you can't meet with people personally, then this is a much more profound thing. But if you don't believe that democracy works, then, it's like, I guess for the the phrase from the gaming world would be, game over. People don't get that. They don't realize that, they think, democracy, well, it's a lot of trouble, a lot of work, I don't know, they're corrupt, this, that, the other. But once you cede control over the control mechanism, all is lost. So you're wasting your time talking about privacy, metadata shredding, the environment, whatever. Healthcare, Black Lives Matter. Well, I don't care what all issues are subsumed by control over the control mechanism. If the control mechanism gets out of control, then game over.
Yep.
And especially with like AI and all that, it becomes very easy for a small group to manipulate and control. This is one of the shades of Cambridge Analytica. But so that's why, in my view, the messaging platform is so critical, right? Because you cannot participate meaningfully in democracy unless you have the ability to communicate among your, friends and family about these issues. Surveys have shown that a lot of what people message is about politics and stuff like that. If you feel like you can't really say the truth in that, then you don't have a way to really form political views, and you can't really participate as if you feel like you're being spied on as a citizen, and then you can't have democracy, and then game over. So I think that this kind of messaging, it's not going to stop the cameras on the streets directly, right? I mean, maybe eventually a more democratic society could reduce that, but all that's needed and what is sufficient would be a protected sphere for political discourse. And I think that a component of that, besides the messaging, is also payments. And this may surprise you, the Supreme Court said, money is speech, but I'm not a real fan of that perspective that they took there, because that's caused a lot of damage in our country, right? But if you want high quality information, you might have to pay a little bit for it. Or if you have high quality information and you want to, be incentivized to provide it in a good way, then maybe you should be able to get a little dough for doing that. So you have to have a payment system as well in the protected sphere, especially for paying for the ferreting out and the digesting and the presenting of information. Absent that, the protected sphere just for message communication is probably a bit hollow, I would guess. So
it's interesting. You touch on a really important topic.
And if the payments can be traced, then your metadata shredding for your messaging doesn't help you, right? So that's why we send our payments over our metadata shredding messaging, and that provides a protected sphere. And then you can actually be a citizen in democracy. You can actually develop your views and have some specific decisions. Now, I'll mention one more thing, and then I'm going to shut up and I'll turn the question back over to you. But the third and final piece is you need then some kind of voting mechanism that is effective to control the kind of society that we have today, which is, very complex. I could talk about Switzerland and Denmark, but those are rather monoculture compared to LA, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different problem, So the real problem is not just LA, but LA is part of a whole world, right? And the set of issues are far more complex than any politician can ever really meaningfully weigh in on or read about or have intuition about or anything. It's gone beyond that because of technology, really. So the idea, remember, the ancient Greeks had, in fact, if you look at it, it's generally almost always misrepresented in my view, but the actual control of Athenian classical era democracy during the Athens, what they created all of Western civilization, arguably, right, was by the jury system. The jury was just like two people who disagree could present their case to 600 to 1,000, or more people, large juries, right? Each would get a chance to say their case, and then this respect, there was no judges, no lawyers, right? And then the jurors would vote by secret ballot. They made these special bronze discs, one with a hole in it, one without it. I've seen them, and then they put them in the urn. And if you put the one with the hole in it on the right side, that meant guilty. Otherwise, no one could see what you were doing. And they weren't allowed to talk either, the jurors. And so that basically create a decision that was irreversible. There was no appeal. And then if it was a guilty verdict, then each party would propose their punishment, and the jury would vote again once, which punishment to accept, and that was it, done. So in other words, if you were a politician in Athenian, in Athens in that time, and you proposed a law which some citizen decided was unconstitutional, you were a volunteer legislator, then you could be put to death, because he could sue you in the jury system, and then if you lost, he might say, be put to death, and you might say, be fired without pay. That's
yeah.
But we fired him without pay. Like, right. So, and the jury would say, well, screw that. Yeah, and that would be it, and it's done. There's no, it's over. There's an Archon guy with a giant weapon. And they used special machines to randomize which person got to go to which jury and make sure it was balanced by region. They had these districts. It was part of the Constitution, and actually those machines were only recently felt, like in the 60s, when the U.S. charities decided to build a subway system for those Athenians. They dug up the agora, and they found these weird pieces of stone with all these little slots in them, and that was the thing. You put the marbles in here, and if the white marble's in that row, then those people go to that jury.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it's like real serious stuff. There was no, you had to come out of the same room you went into. They checked your ID card back. They had ID cards, and for this, and so it's my claim that is the true democracy, and it's only now applicable again. You see, that was disparaged when societies became a little larger. And, it wasn't just one city. Not everyone knew about everything, right? Things got more complicated. You had to send your representatives to wherever to run, to be in the central government, right? So you couldn't do that anymore. And so that's representative democracy, but it was only supposed to be, like everyone was supposed to know the representative or the representatives they were choosing between, because each representative would only represent like 5,000 people. So representative democracy made more sense when it started, but now it don't make no sense. I'm not going to do it. I mean, it's they really don't. So so these guys, they don't read the thousands of pages of legislation that they sign when, in less than 24 hours, right? So if you want an electoral system that can scale with the size and complexity of the modern world, you have to go back to what they had in Athens, which is what I've called it sample voting. And that's what we use in XX Network, and I've published stuff on that, and you and I were talking about, just before the podcast, this little booklet, the Seventh Estate. That's something I made. It's also sample voting based, and we have the rsvoting.org. That's the URL project. You can see the white paper there. Read all the stuff. We ran binding sample elections for the council.
What was the URL again? RS voting.
RS voting.
Okay.
It's just like the
.org.
RS and the word voting, no spaces, no hyphens. .org. That's the website for that project. You can see that about 24 people on the academic or the technical board there, many of whom now got their PhDs by working on RS voting. So a lot of them are now professors, or they weren't when the project started. And anyways, it's new, and as far as I'm told, I gave a keynote at a major social choice theory conference, and no one could tell me that anyone else had published anything about this. So apparently I invented the sample voting. I find that incomprehensible, but apparently true. And there's one more piece to it that you need, and people don't recognize, and it's related to blockchain. It's worth mentioning here, and private money, right, digital currency and so on. And that is, you see, in voting, technically you have polling place voting, which is like where other voters and the poll workers can see that you're in the booth and that you're not showing anyone how you voted.
Yep.
That's what the booth is about. It's not really just so you can protect your privacy by closing the curtain. You have to close the curtain because society has an interest in you not being threatened or bribed to vote a certain way. So it's what's called ballot secrecy. It's a stronger thing than voter privacy, right? Ballot secrecy. So if you're not voting in a booth, in a polling place, then there's a big problem because you can't have ballot secrecy anymore. Because these cute little gizmos let you, live stream your voting act, right?
Yeah.
So, send me the Bitcoin here and I'll vote your way, no problema, right? So it's over. So the stuff we've been working on in the community of the blockchain and so on to make the world a better place, actually, it kind of implodes what's called remote voting, which is non-polling place voting. The technology of remote voting. So I found also a solution to that problem, and it's, in my view, the only decent, good solution. There is another solution that's really pretty ineffective, pretty ugly. So, and we call that decoy ballots. The essential idea is simply that, like, you can request a ballot that you're sure won't be counted, but is indistinguishable from a real ballot in perpetuity. And so you can live stream the voting act and sell your vote to people on the other side of the issue. And they really only want to buy it from people on the other side of the issue because they don't want to pay their own people to vote the way they were going to vote anyways, right? So they kind of find people that they think are on the other side and they try to pay them. But those people be happy to waste the money of the vote buyers, right? But yeah, there's another twist to it, which is that the election officials could actually cheat the voters by giving them a real ballot, since it's indistinguishable, and then giving that decoy to someone who they know is going to vote a way they don't like. So when you request a decoy, you get it. There's this thing called proof of decoy. And so that's a technology that lets you very easily, right, because you're not necessarily a computer literate or savvy person, right? That's very easily be able to check, but definitively that is a decoy, using that side information you get through a different channel, which you then claim you never got and you throw away. You can check that it really is a decoy and won't be counted. So with proof of decoy, then the solution to the voter secrecy, to remote voting, works. It's great. We've used it. It's implemented, and now it's up on the GitHub and on the 7th Estate, and it's what we are going to use for governance within the XX network. So we're like super excited about this.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I can't wait to take a deeper look into it. I've spent a lot of time looking at open source election systems as part of my spare time, and I know that the city of San Francisco has some
open source. What you it's remote. You won't. I don't think the world's going to be fixed by polling place voting, because what happens is people, if you ask, everyone has to vote on everything, then no one's really voting on anything. It's a joke these days, because it's just too. So you got to let everyone vote on one thing that they can really look into, and really weigh in, and they know that their vote really counts, is meaningful. So that's why we just like 1,000 people are designated for each issue. And they know that they're really picked randomly. There's no way that could be manipulated. So they know their vote's really going to make some difference. And all they have to do is look at that one issue for a couple weeks to really look at it. And so what I was saying, that's only now possible, again, because people, it's because of these things and the web, right? You could look up anything, and anyone could basically find out about a pretty complicated issue to a certain level these days, I think. That's my experience anyways. And so that's, for the first time, in 2,500 years, everyone can meaningfully vote on, one jury decision every 6 months.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think
instead of everyone voting on one very blurry thing, and then those people just do something completely different from what they said they were going to do anyways, right? You're down at a different level now. You can have, actually, the numbers are quite stunning. In the U.S., you might have hundreds of thousands of elections for a country of scale U.S. but you can do a lot of, you can still let people vote meaningfully but burn through a bunch of those by doing complete comparison matrix between, say, all the candidates that want to run for a certain office, like to control the Department of Agriculture. Maybe 50 people sign up. Well, you can compare them all to each other or have a tournament and then find out, okay, which one the public thinks is best. Because it's actually a proof of what the public would have voted if they had 2 weeks to focus on that issue, if more than a majority of people of a random sample vote that way. That's we use sampling for everything, for drug safety, drug efficacy, airplane safety, everything. The whole society is based. We use sampling constantly for all kinds of life critical things, but it's not used in voting. And I'll just mention one other funny thing. It's kind of tragic, but it's like the flip side, the inverse of that is we use lotteries to bilk the poor. But actually, lotteries are the perfect thing to incentivize people to participate in democracy. And so if you look at the 7th estate, it's built in. So the blind signatures that I invented back in the early 80s, for DigiCash and all that, it's a perfect way to make it so that your chance, you have an independent chance to win the lottery by casting a ballot, but it's not at all correlated to how you voted. Cannot be.
That is super interesting. I've never heard that idea before.
It's my idea. It's part of,
That's a great idea.
It's a whole new way.
Get out the vote, win the lottery, win the jackpot.
There's a hilarious video on the Steelcase site. The guy says, well, I designed this new chair. The chair I'm sitting in actually is a really good chair. Is this guy, with designer glass, and he says, very end, he says, it's a new way of sitting. No, it's a new science of sitting. When you feel it, you'll get it. It's like, yeah, it's a whole new way to do this stuff. I created it all, and when you think about it for a few minutes, you'll get it. So it'll happen. So we're building out the infrastructure right now in a scalable way, and we're not receiving that much attention. That's okay. We got we got hundreds of people that are supporting us in all kinds of ways, and thousands of people, and that's so the blockchain community is a really great place to get the kind of support that's needed for this, but ultimately it's something that can benefit the whole society.
I want to go back to something you said earlier about the messaging tool and the role money plays in that ecosystem, and that's kind of where we started this thread about trust and democracy, which I think is really important. And you keep referring back to the phone and technology, and how that has actually eroded a lot of our trust. And so there's two things that we kind of touched on.
It's double-edged.
Yeah, we touched on information and trusting your vote.
That just plays on both sides.
Yeah,
I don't know in person, but I saw them advertised. There was a company that made them. Yeah, it was kind of cool. Yeah,
that is pretty cool. Yeah, so one thing I'm curious. So there's the trusting your vote, which we kind of just covered a lot of. How do you trust your vote? The other piece is disinformation, the spread of disinformation, and I think that's been that in the last election we know, and also through these past couple of years has really eroded trust in democracy, and that's been the goal of the people that are doing it. So I'm wondering, how does your system fight disinformation, if at all? Like, what are some of the ideas that you guys have around, or that you personally have around, how we can stop that issue? This is just a random question that popped in my head as I was thinking through some of the things you were talking about.
Alex, it's a key component of the whole picture. With absent that, you're hosed, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like one of those. You ever see those spider diagrams that the venture people like? There's 12 different aspects. Your company's a little weak in any of them, then you're worthless, and we'll buy you for whatever, right? It's like, but democracy is a more serious matter. But so if no one knows what the heck's really going on, then the whole thing doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So that's why I was saying that the protected sphere in which you can pay for quality information and discuss things among your peers is critical. And can that lead to quality information? No, not. You see, one of the big problems I mean, I don't want to get too McLuhan-esque. You can try to understand what's going on in the world. People, we are really changed by the social media, and we were changed by TV. And when people used to just read sequential stuff, they were much more logical, and democracy made a lot more sense and it was more workable. But that doesn't mean that so news isn't what we need to make wise decisions. What we need is analysis. So part of the great thing about TV was that we were allowed to have news for free, that airwaves were guaranteed to have news and that would have to be fair and balanced. So we got bombarded with this idea of news. So, do I need to know what's happening at every minute? So am I a day trader? No. I'm a citizen. I have limited bandwidth to give back to help, steer society. If that can't be effectively used, we're lost. So I don't want to be bombarded with news. What I need is analysis. I need wisdom. I need guidance. I need to sort of, see what the trends are, but, and I can't be misled. So that's a very different request. And for that kind of information, you have to pay. All kinds of people will give you news all day long with commercials and everything, or the government to pay them to give you news because that keeps people just, barefoot and pregnant, right? But so to speak. But sorry, that's a bad, maybe that's an uncool
I don't know
the phrase these days, but whatever. It's that's part of the problem. Like we used to say, you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And news is part of the problem, but what you need to participate is analysis, and that's something that you can pay for, and people can earn a living by providing. You don't have to be CNN to provide analysis. That's something that can be more of a grassroots cottage industry.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
the wisdom that we have accumulated over these last couple thousand years, which is like this huge legacy that we should act responsibly for. But a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm born now and, what the hell, maybe just blow up the world, I don't really care. Well, no, it's like thousands of generations have struggled to bring us to this point, to improve the world and for us, and we are at a critical juncture here, and there is tremendous opportunity and other scenarios.
Yeah, tremendous risk if we don't step up.
We're right there, especially now with the pandemic. People are starting to think a little bit more like, well, what am I living? What is it with me? Why should we do it that way? This is the moment when we can decide, hey, let's try to go in a way that harnesses the collective intelligence, that allows us to, taking things to the next level is not putting rich people in fucking space. Okay, that all sounds, oh yeah, well, sure, we got to get off this planet because we polluted it, and yeah, the solution, we'll put rich people in space for vacations. Yeah, that sounds great. Makes a lot of sense to me. That is complete horseshit, right? That reveals so many levels of delusion.
Yeah.
We are at the precipice of being able to take things to the next level, which is to harness the collective intelligence. All the progress that society has made has been by individual actors and some interactions, but they've been very limited. Now we have the possibility to harness the global collective intelligence. And to protect that, you need a kind of sample voting, right? And you need these protected spheres. But then you can use it, and that will take humanity to the next level. And we're right there.
Right at the cusp.
Or we could go, we could go back into feudalism and respect celebrities and pay attention to the news and, all this, and then, respect our betters and, kowtow to the rich. Sure, we could do that too. That's a possibility, but that's not what all those generations were fighting for.
How can people participate now? I mean, what can we do to support what you're doing and the work that you're doing with these various projects? You know, what's the call to action?
Uh, well, we have those episodically. So I think we just missed the. If we had spoken a few weeks ago, I would have said, sign up for the Violet team to be a node operator. But that's closed. So we had a year ago, 600, 800 people signed up to be node operators. Then we had another. We let in a few hundred more a few weeks ago, but it was only a short call. I think it was 1 week or 8 days call. So we had a public sale of some small fraction of our tokens several months ago. But so watch, join our collective. You can download the app and keep updated on what's going on, and support us by just kind of participating on the various forums and educate yourself about what we're doing, and watch this space, because there will be more opportunities to we're like a public company now, right? Because there are people that own our tokens, so it's like
Right.
Be very careful with like forward-looking statements, but
Oh yeah, trust me, I know.
Probably there will be more opportunities to involve yourself directly, and so if you get the app, then it'll keep you apprised of what's going on, and you can learn about these issues at your own pace, and find out when there are more opportunities to join in. So, I will say this though, that if you are interested specifically in the election technology part, we do have some programs which are not public. Those are invitation only right now. But if you write to me, like at david@chaum.com, and say, like, I'm really interested in the voting stuff, and to write some code for that, or to run some elections, or something like that, 7th state, which you can do, anywhere. If you're a non-U.S. person, particularly, because I might be able to get you involved in some of those things, and I think that's really critical and really interesting work, and it'll give you it will advantage you in giving you insight into these key technologies at an early stage. So I think.
And then the non-U.S. person thing is just if you're wanting to be compensated in the token for the work. But if you're just wanting to contribute as an open source developer.
Yeah, look at the regulatory environment. I mean, when I decided to do this stuff, I thought, well, by the time we want to, sell some tokens or something, everything will be, straightened out. But exactly the opposite way. It's gone. That's sad. It's really harming the U.S. interests, obviously. Look at, what other countries, some countries like China, moving ahead with this kind of thing, and in different ways. But I think it's unfortunate and sad. But so we're between a rock and a hard place. So we just have to adapt to that. So we actually pivoted recently and said, nope. If you're a U.S. person, you can't run nodes. You can't do anything.
Gotcha. But I mean, if you just want to contribute to the code and you're just an open source developer and you just want to contribit, you can do that, right?
Like a lot of people, we told them, you signed up and we were going to pay you to be a node operator with these tokens and stuff. But then we changed our mind and you can't do it. They were like, well, we'll do it anyways. So
yeah.
There's a bunch of people. I don't know exactly because it's not in writing yet, but. Person who knows a lot of these people, there's quite a few people that are like that. So that's
right.
I find that very heartwarming and super great. We like to give people a piece of the action. That's also a good thing, even if they're not, coming to us with their hands out or they're doing it only for that reason. It's still a good thing to share the participation in what we're doing. So it's sad that we can't do that for U.S. persons.
And we're bumping up against the top of the hour here, and I want to respect your time. But I always ask this at the end of these shows. What have I not asked you that I should have asked, or is there anything that you would like to say to the listeners that are listening in on this podcast?
Well, I don't think I got a chance to really dive too deep into the difference between the metadata shredding that we do over our network for the messages and the kind of privacy against the full take, right? The total network surveillance attack that can be accomplished by the likes of Tor, etc.
Yeah.
And the state of the VPN industry, which is a whole other interesting subject. So suffice, I could just comment briefly on that if you like.
Go ahead.
It's like I said, there's nothing I can do about the fact that if you go outside, there's a lot of TV cameras, there's a lot of surveillance, but I can provide you a protected sphere. That's what I'm trying to do. And I think that's critical into the whole game. If you look at another thing, like when you go outside the protected sphere, you have like high bandwidth communication with services and so on, videos, whatever, the province of VPN, say, proper. Well, there's no effective solution for that, really, because it's so easy to link senders and recipients by the size of the packets and the timing of the packets, and you really can't afford to hide either of those very well. Independent of how clever you are or whatever technology you're using. I mean, it's just, you can't introduce random delays, and you can't, only the military can afford to buy full bandwidth channels and just fill them with noise, unless,
right.
So no one can see when. No. When I was at Berkeley, the FBI had the top floor of this office building. You could see it from the whole campus and everywhere. And the thing is, they always left all the lights on all night. This was the thing, the joke, because, they don't want anyone to know when they're working overtime up there. Our guess was they were never working overtime. But anyway, they left the lights on 24/7. So, but you can't afford to do that. And you can't afford to introduce a lot of latency when the whole point of if I was talking to you and there's random time delays, when you get over 300 or 400 milliseconds, people can't communicate. That's why you have the push to talk on radio. You can't, it just doesn't work. So you just have to write off high bandwidth. But what you can, and video cameras that are surveilling you from drones or wherever, you don't know. But there is a portion of interaction which fortunately turns out to be the most important, the critical part, right? Which is this protected sphere that's necessary and sufficient to regain control over the world. And that's what we have to focus on.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that bit. Well, thank you so much for being on the show again. This was an interesting conversation. I know we covered a lot of ground.